Hello and welcome to the show. A few days ago, America and the world marked the solemn anniversary of the 9/11 attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people and ushered in the age of the War on Terror. And of course, Joe Biden marked the event as only he could, by telling a complete and total lie that put himself at the center of the story of al-Qaeda's deadly attack on America. You're not going to believe this one, so let's get going as we go busting the narrative. Right, so we all know the story of 9/11 and everything that happened in the days and weeks after the world changed forever. And indeed, pretty much all of us can remember where we were that fateful day. All of us except Joe Biden. He only thinks he does.
Ground Zero in New York. And I remember standing there the next day and looking at the building. I felt like I was looking through the gates of hell. It looked so devastating because from where you could stand.
This is, of course, an old trope of Joe Biden's. You know, he takes an event, a tragedy, a disaster, and tells a story that puts him at the center of it. Think of the way he constantly repeats the story of how his house almost burnt down, telling it to disaster victims over and over and over again, when in fact it was just a small kitchen fire. So it is not surprising, perhaps, to learn that in fact Joe Biden was nowhere near Ground Zero the day after the attacks. He was in the Senate, speaking about the attacks as the nation's lawmakers gathered to pay respect and ponder their next moves. There's even footage of it.
Many in his constituency have died. Buildings in this state are still burning. And in the ultimate American way, he calls at the end of his speech for not abrogating the basic cherished liberties that this nation has. I doubt whether you would hear that on any other assembly in the world after such an attack, and I compliment him for it.
But the fascinating thing is that more members of the press corps, perhaps emboldened by columns in the New York Times and Washington Post that seem to be sending the message, it's time for Joe to go, well, they have started to ask questions about just what the hell is going on with the president's memory. Check out White House flack John Kirby trying to cope when he was asked why the president lied about where he was on 9/11, and so much else.
John, in the past couple of weeks, the president has lied about being at Ground Zero the day after the September 11th attacks, falsely claimed he saw the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse, claimed his grandfather died in the hospital days before his birth. What is going on with the president? Is he just believing things that didn't happen did happen, or is he just randomly making stuff up?
The president was deeply touched and honored to be able to spend 9/11 with military members there in Alaska and some families, and was honored by their presence and the chance to make an important set of remarks about why we need to continue to remember that day, and he did that, and he spoke about a visit to Ground Zero, which he did participate in about a week or so after the event, and what that looked and what that smelled and what that felt like.
And on CNN, they're even now doing fact checks of the man. Fact checks that are in fact correct and not propaganda.
And he has done, I don't know if it's similar things, but he's sort of told some stories that don't line up quite like this before.
Yeah, this president has a pattern at this point of either inventing or embellishing stories about his own past, his biography. He did it 3 times in one speech last month alone. He claimed he had witnessed a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh when he actually showed up about 6 hours later. He claimed that his grandfather had died just days before he was born himself at the same hospital. In fact, his grandpa died more than a year before in a different state, not the same hospital. And he also repeated a favorite false story that I and others have debunked over and over again about a supposed conversation with an Amtrak train conductor he was friends with, who was actually deceased at the time the conversation would have had to take place. And that's not all.
Does this mean the worm is turning? Well, perhaps just a little. But as the polls start to turn and suggest that working-class Democrats are continuing to shift over to the right because they are turned off by the toxic mix of elite culture wars and welfare dependency pushed by the left, things could start happening a whole lot faster. As the man said in Hemingway's classic The Sun Also Rises, when asked how he went bankrupt, slowly, then all at once. Thanks for watching. I am James Morrow, and to support this channel, please like, share, and subscribe below. And I'll see you next week for more Busting the Narrative. Bye-bye.